like 4 days after the fire, we were already starting to see like, how are we going to be better people in the end? How are we going to help people better? How can we give better in the future? How can we support people better in the future? Same thing as, racing, like how can I do better next time? How can I bring more to the team?
Welcome to the Dark Zone, an adventure racing podcast. This is your host, Brian Gatens. In adventure racing lingo, a dark zone is a time when, due to darkness or safety, teams are paused on the course before continuing with the race. During that time, stories are exchanged, friendships are kindled, spirits are restored, and teams have a chance to prepare for the next challenge. We hope that you make good use of this dark zone. We're glad that you're here. Today, we are joined by Katie Ferrington of Never Summer Race Productions and the Rocky Mountain Adventure Series. A longtime racer and race director, Katie walks us through her introduction to the sport, what she has learned along the way, and how her adventure race background has helped her family deal with a recent challenge. Originally recorded in May of 2022, I'm happy to report that the July edition of Never Summer went off without a hitch, and congratulations to Katie and her team. Enjoy today's episode, and thank you, Katie, for joining the Dark Zone, an adventure racing podcast. But today, the Dark Zone is joined by Katie Ferrington. Katie is from Boulder, Colorado, which, by the way, I have two questions for people who live in Boulder. Is how great is it, and why aren't we all living there? But we'll come back to the second, Katie. Okay. Katie is a longtime race director, promoter, racer herself. She's kind enough to join the Dark Zone today to talk a bit about her life, her experience, what she sees working with newer racers, and then what also she sees as involved in the Rocky Mountain Adventure Series, which she'll talk a bit about, and then her own races, which are the Never Summer Race Productions. So, Katie, thank you for joining the Dark Zone today. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. Thanks for having me.
Before we dive into the specifics of the races that you do and you organize, and very vibrant race scene out west, and once again, Colorado, beautiful and all of that, talk to us a bit about yourself. What's your origin story? How did you get into adventure racing?
Yeah, I actually lived in Central Florida, early 2000s. And at that point I was doing triathlons and some longer distance running, like marathons, and just had some friends invite me to, I believe it was like the Bear Adventure Race in Jacksonville, and went and did it and had a great time. I don't even know if we officially finished, but had a great time. Started participating then. At that time it was the Pangea race series in Central Florida, and started traveling up, more north into Georgia and the Carolinas to race. And then in 2010, left Florida to come back to my home state of Colorado. And at that point, kind of switched over. There weren't many short races. The calendar here was way more scarce compared to, the Southeast. So I started just meeting some racers, and instead of doing the short ones, I just signed up for more of the expedition races. And that's when, the Untamed and the Gold Rush, California, and went down to Belize and, some of the newer long races, Expedition Oregons and stuff. So that's kind of my history. I started, I guess, officially 2006, and still love it. Still loving it, still doing it. So when you made the jump, and it's not an uncommon story that adventure racers talk about how they're involved in endurance sports, right? Marathoning, triathlon, things like that. They make that jump into adventure racing. Like I said, is the most common pathway that we see. How quickly did you take to it? Was it a good experience right away? Did you suffer and kind of love it? Did you take to it like a duck takes the water? Like, what was your entry like into the sport? Yeah, I think the duck to the water, I loved it. We didn't do well. We actually had, I think, a chain break, and one teammate just want to quit on us. But during that time, I realized these people have done one of these before. I never have, and I'm having fun, and I feel like I'm good at this. So it was kind of an immediate, I think I need to give this sport a chance. I think I might be good at it.
So did you follow the trajectory where you joined up with a group of people who had some racing experience, and they kind of dragged you along for that first race, and you kind of watched and you learned?
Yeah, that team didn't have much experience. It was more of I did that race. And then my husband, Nick, who at that time was, he liked to do some of the running events I did. And he had some basic training experience with the Air Force Academy. So he thought he could navigate. And I thought I was an experienced adventure racer having like 1 8-hour race under my belt. Sure. So,
very common belief, by the way.
So no, we did terrible, and good thing we were still together. We suffered through. I remember my first 24-hour race, quit after 6 hours running out of water in the waterways of Central Florida.
Yeah. And just the whole thing just falling apart. right?
So many mistakes. Yes. So it took a while to find some more experienced racers that we actually, did good. So
gotcha. And to your credit, and a large part of the dark zone is about the newer racer. To your credit, you didn't allow that initial frustration, which is, you get to live in two worlds. It's maddeningly difficult and it's wildly enjoyable. And those two things can be agreeable at the same time, right? That could be happening. You didn't let that get in the way of your own enjoyment. And then clearly you got a bit of the bug, and all of a sudden you found yourself in the Southeast, right? You mentioned Georgia, you mentioned Florida, things like that. When did you make the jump to multi-day expedition racing?
Oh, it was, I want to say Untamed New England was the first one. And that was once I moved out here to Colorado, but it was a team that I knew the people from Florida. So that was 2010. So I feel for me, it was a slow growth. And I really, I grew every time I'd see a team like kill it. I wanted to be like them. At that point, it was, Tim and Anna, who were Shake a Leg Miami. I just look at them and they'd win every race, and I really wanted to be like that. So it was encouraging or just motivational for me to watch those great racers, and I wanted to do better. But it was a slow, I guess that was 4 years before I did my first multi-day race.
The slow growth model is sometimes a bit different. Very often we'll speak to adventure racers, either on the dark zone or informally, that they'll get in the bug right away and they'll jump right into a major race with very little thought about it. And your gradual growth into the sport probably helped you because the frustration was never so high that you wanted to walk away from the sport altogether.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. I think I actually looking back, I did a C2C with the prior race organizers.
Okay.
So that might have been my first, but we finished in like 2 days. But yeah, it was gradual.
So did you go through the normal feeling that when you made the jump to multi-day racing, and I remember this for myself when I started doing it, the race would start, it would be a 3-day race or a 5-day race. And you'd say to yourself, oh my goodness, like I'm not going to be back inside in a bed formally for like 4 days from now or 5 days from now. How did you wrap your head around the sleep part of it? Because that's a big leap for a lot of people.
Yeah, it is. I think, just asking as many experienced racers as possible, how do you stay awake? And I remember at that time, even the first 24-hour race, at 2, 3 a.m., feeling tired and going off the side of the road. And now I laugh at that because it's, I can go, 2 or 3 nights before that happens. But initially it's, it's a big jump. I try to ask around and find what to do. And then for me, it was, what caffeine, or for me, 5-hour energy worked to get through that first night and the second night. But yeah, I think that I got hooked on expedition racing because that sufferfest and just the knowing that at the end, how much you feel just positive and empowered that you just did something. So right. It was,
there's definitely a feeling that a lot of adventure racers have that it is very rewarding and enthralling and exciting to do something that you thought you couldn't do previously, right? We all think we have our own limits, and then those limits kind of are, first off, they're most often self-imposed, right? They're nobody else. And then when you break through it by virtue of doing a big race or having a good experience, racing with people, racing faster, having success, when you get a taste of that, it's hard not to return to that, right? And so time and time again, adventure racers talk a bit about that. What I found interesting in your trajectory is it sounds like there was a pretty vibrant scene in the Southeast, but then you went to Colorado, which is quite honestly an adventure mecca, right? Boulder and Golden and Denver and all of that. You found it to be pretty thin out there for adventure racing. Was that your experience?
Yes, there was maybe at that time the Adventure Extreme Series, AXS, was going on, and they maybe, there's one race in Moab, one in Buena Vista, but it was really far apart. It wasn't the scene that, where you get 2 races a month if you wanted to down in the Southeast.
Why was that, do you think? Were people distracted with other outdoor pursuits? Was there so much else to do out there between the mountains? And
still we're finding that we're like, there's so many people out here that love this stuff. Like, why are races, not, just busting at the seams, 500 to 1,000 racers, and there's so much to do. The ultra marathons, the tries, even just, the bag and the 14ers, getting as many 14,000 foot mountains, in their pockets. There's the Swiftwater scene here. And there's just lots.
Right. There's such a wide, it's a highly motivated clientele, but it's also a clientele with a lot of choices, right? So to your point, you could ultra run, you could climb, you could pet, you go with the 14ers, you could run across the desert, you could be in Moab in 6 hours, you could be in Fruita, you could be mountain biking. And so it's interesting that in the East, we struggle for attendance at adventure racing because we have a clientele that isn't wildly interested in it because there's so many other things to do. And they're not really as fit as you are out West, where in Colorado, you have the challenge of there's just so many other options. And therefore getting people to get into adventure racing is they're like, well, I could ski, I could hike, I could climb, I could paddle, I could do all of that. Yeah. Interesting. But it sounds like you've tried to work through that through the Rocky Mountain Adventure Series. What was that?
Correct. Yeah. About, 4 years ago. We have some amazing race directors. You had Jason and Abby up in Idaho. We had, there was some other, Chelsea Luttrell was at the time doing some races. Now it's, Jess Evans, guys doing some other smaller races. And we all were like, we need a centralized website and series that people can come to find these races. Prior it was, you had to, just Google for a race and you'd be taken to this organization or this organization. So we wanted to create just a kind of a home base for all of us race directors to advertise our events, and then also motivate teams to do multiple events in the series by offering a prize purse at the end for the winners.
With the is it somewhat like out West, like it is back East here, where race directors have kind of like general areas that they work inside of, and you all sort of respect each other's locations?
Yeah, we kind of came into this like, all right, you're doing over there, I'm going to be over here. And so, that's, we weren't really intending to do that or didn't have that rule, but it's kind of worked out. We have our regions that we
Well, that's basic human decency.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, we have it here, and I think it's everywhere. I don't think it's not the East or the West or even the central part of the country. I think that race directors, for the most part, want to be successful, but more importantly, they want to see other race directors be successful, because when there's a successful race in Idaho and there's a clientele base that really enjoyed it, they may travel down the spine of the Rocky Mountain and do a race in Colorado, do a race in New Mexico, things like that. And so to your credit, right, through the adventure series, that you guys you're not cannibalizing each other.
Correct. Yeah. We usually have a meeting the July or August of the year before the, race season's so short here because of the weather. Unless, one of us keeps saying we're going to put on a fat bike snow race that we haven't done yet, but the season's so short that it's about 3-4 months of races. We need to get organized as a group of race directors, not step on each other's toes zone wise, but also dates. We talk about, all right, it's really good to have a 6-hour race at the beginning and then like they're a 12-hour and then like the 24 or 2-day race will be later in the summer. So we definitely want to, like you said, the team has a great experience at the 6-hour race. We want them to get back on the website and what's the next, next distance, next place I can go. And
right. What you want is you want your racers on the way home from the race, one person driving, one person in the passenger seat, looking up the menu, where's the next race we can go? That's what you want, right? And we hear that time and time again, is that people sign up for their next race after doing their first race, even if the things have gone south. They still love it and off they go. Yeah. We have a lot of listeners to the Dark Zone. We get feedback are people who've made the jump from, there's progression. You go from racer to, you go from multi-sport endurance athlete to adventure racer, where you do a 6-hour race, 8-hour race. Very often people get into larger races, then they get into race directing. You're in an interesting perspective because as a race director yourself, and I definitely want you to talk about the Never Summer races, and we'll get into that in a second. But as someone who's so involved with the Rocky Mountain Adventure Series, what are some of the best practices you would give to aspiring race directors? Like, what are the few things that they should really focus on if they want a race to go well, if they want to start something up in their region? How do they go about doing that?
Yeah, good question. For us here in Colorado, permitting is an issue. So it's like immediate conversation with the National Forest, the BLM, whoever, if you know private property owners, just before you even get your heart set on putting on a race, talk to the local permitting agencies and get a feel for what they're looking for. And is it possible? You don't want to start going down the path of like, I'm going to be a race director now. I'm motivated. There's nothing that's ever been over here. Well, maybe there's a reason there's nothing ever been there because it's really hard to permit. Also for me, looking at the water scene, some areas of the country, you can find water anywhere and find boats anywhere. Here in the Mountain West, we have, only so many rivers and lakes and reservoirs, and there aren't boat rental services like there are other parts. So, starting to kind of get a feel for, are you going to have people bring their own, watercraft, or if there's a place that you can rent from close by. So, the reason for Never Summer Race Productions back in 2015, I was camping over near Grand Lake on the other side of the Continental Divide from Estes Park. And we were camping over there as a family, and I was looking at this is a huge national forest. There's no adventure races here. And it's right. That area is the Never Summer Wilderness right there, which we can't actually go into the wilderness as a permitted event, but that's where the name came from. And then fast forward a few years, I have had races in the summer that it actually snowed on the racer. So it makes sense. It's a perfect name. I just encourage first time race directors, talk to your local permitting agency. What's the water situation? And start going from there.
In the Mountain West, we talk about, we'll talk about America for a second, because the other parts of the world we can talk about, especially with Africa, and now there's a race in the Faroe Islands. Alaska, when it comes to being outdoors and size and mass and danger, Alaska is really by itself in its whole brand new atmosphere, right? It's the last frontier. It's massive. Mm-hmm. And so races there are challenging. I would assume the Mountain West, with the elevation, the fact that you could have you could see all seasons in a day, access to water, the air, not the air quality, but how thin the air can be based on altitude, the size of the mountains. If a race goes off in the wrong direction, they're going to be out there for days and days and days. I would assume that safety plays a really large role. Not that races back east are not safe, but in the American East, for the most part, if you take a safety bearing of a certain direction, unless you're like in parts of Maine, you could walk for 7, 8, 9 hours. And for the most part, you could stumble across a road. That's not always the case in the American West.
Not always the case, but because we cannot go into wilderness areas, granted, racers can accidentally go into wilderness areas. We try to keep them closer to some form of a trail system road. Definitely the elevation, altitude, sickness. I'm going to say the highest I've had a point was at 13,000 feet. And there was a local team that was the only one that could do that one. So it's the challenge. The dehydration is very dry here, and there's not a lot of water. So as a race director prior, I try to make sure a few days before I'm going and checking out all the reentrants and it looks like a water source on the map may not actually be there. So I try to give everyone a heads up at the pre-race meeting, like expect water or don't expect water. So the dehydration and elevation, altitude is definitely a factor that I'm always thinking about, especially when I have teams come in from sea level.
Which probably gets in the way of a team flying out there to do a race. Like I would assume, what is the longest race that is put on in the Adventure Series? How many days?
We did right now it's this season is 24 hour. We had, Expedition Colorado was scheduled and that was canceled for this year. And then the Nomad, which has been a 48-hour race for many years. The last 2 years has had permitting issues, being able to switch it, like the BLM National Forest coordination hasn't been able to work out for them. So we haven't been able to put that one on. So right now it's 24 hours. Typically we have something longer than that.
Gotcha. Your advice is well taken that the best thing an aspiring race director could do is before he or she does anything when it comes to the race is talk to the people who sign the bottom line.
Correct.
Because nothing could be more toxic to a relationship than for an aspiring race director to be talking publicly about a place where they're putting a race on and word gets back to the permitting agency that, whoa, you didn't talk to us first. It's over. Right. Like people will get their rightfully so, their back kind of goes up and they push back on that. And obviously, very much for the Mountain West, the idea of water on the course, water to be on, water to consume, and that plays a major role. I'd never consider, you consider the West to be such a mecca for so many things, but it sounds like the Adventure Series has specific challenges that really aren't found in other parts of the country. They're lower in elevation and they're a lot more wet. Mm-hmm. Which kind of points to why the Southeast is so good. Yeah. Right? Because the Southeast, you could walk off your couch in theory and you could race, and it's not as challenging as you would have in Colorado or the high peaks.
Yep. And the population growth here is booming. These, permitting agencies are trying to restrict foot traffic, bike traffic. So they're just limiting more and more. So it's tough. And, with the wilderness areas that are out here in other parts of the Mountain West, if a trail may go through National Forest BLM and then just cut a corner of, a wilderness area and that trail is out and you can't do that. And
can't do that.
And
Okay.
So it is challenging some parts of the state and this region to figure it out.
So when someone shows up out there, and I'm gonna make an assumption, I want you to push back on it. When a newer racer shows up there, I'm going to assume for the most part that he or she probably has already some endurance outdoor experience. And as a result, they may have a sense of overconfidence when it comes to their current skill set and their adventure racing skill set, whether it be the navigation, the multi-sport train back and forth, whatever it is. What is your advice to newer racers? What do you want people to really focus on when you're doing a pre-race briefing and you're looking out over the crowd? What kind of gives you the willies? Like, what do you say to yourself? Ooh, they're gonna have a tough time today.
Yeah. Well, I've definitely learned over the years that I get more people that have that, they think they can conquer the world. And so I've definitely had to back off my altitude gain, elevation during a race, or extend my cutoff to like a 30-hour instead of a 24. It gives me the willies. I guess nothing, just warning them ahead of time, encouraging them, have fun, do what you can, stick together, be safe, skip points if you need to.
Right.
My races, I give that option somewhere along the way to skip points, stay on course. And I'll also try, especially if I know it's a newer racer or a team that, say if you're not here by this time, you really should consider skipping this next section.
Yeah, building in a soft cutoff for them and saying if by noon you're not at CP5 or whatever it is, it's time to consider how you're going to get back over here.
Right. Yep. But no, I encourage, I'm be the first one. If someone emails me like, can I do this? Like, that's not my job to tell, if you can do it or not. I think try it, go for it. And just have a good attitude the whole time. And, if you'll figure out for yourself, if you need to cut back what type of race you do, or you're ready for the next level.
As a teammate yourself, what was your primary role on your team when you do a major, when you went to Untamed New England? And by the way, at this point in the podcast, I always referenced Grant Killian and how Grant Killian needs to come back to adventure racing. I try to work it into every single podcast now that I can. So when you would race, what would your primary role be?
Yeah, more recent years, probably the last 5-6 years, especially even since, becoming a race director and is backup nav. Typically day two, night two, I take over nav and we'll start doing some big chunks of it. Logistics ahead of the race, big on, what time we need to get there, where we need to stay, gear packing. And then team singer, I don't know, Christmas Carol.
You're that person. You're singing 100 bottles of beer on the wall. Right.
It depends on the other energy, level of everybody else.
Exactly. Well, that's always, and for the newer racers out there, it's an art as well as a science to realize what your teammates need and when they need it. Right. Because jolly, happy, we're all in this together teammate might get pushed out of a boat at 3:00 in the morning, as opposed to head down, work hard teammate just doing their job. Right.
Yeah. So at a pretty level, when the mandatory gear comes out, the short film that will be about Expedition Oregon last year and this reverse co-ed team. I don't know, it was Chelsea or Ray. I said, I'm the most consistent. I don't really get super emotional and cry. I don't really get super excited. It's kind of a steady, keep, let's focus here and keep going. And so I kind of bring a level headedness to the team too.
With the backup nav work that you do you keep your hands off the maps for the first day of the race and let the nav be the nav, and then you step in? Is that agreed upon? Here's why I asked the question. We interviewed Rootstock Racing after their win at Shenandoah Epic. And one thing that they talked about was, and this was a new composition of a team. It was Joel Ford, Karen Delaney, and Paul Miller. They talked a lot before the race about what the in-race dynamic was going to be like. Do you find for the most part that when you race with your partners, was that said, Katie's just not going to be involved in the nav until day two, but then no matter what happens, it goes over her the night of day two? Was that a predetermined expectation?
Yes, we usually talk about it. And I've, over the years have learned like that you need to talk about this. And yeah, I'd rather not ask you every, where are we going and be up on the maps. I feel like it just slows us down, especially if whoever is lead nav is doing a great job, like just support them and say they're doing a great job. And then, we usually have a designated like this leg, I'm going to take over. If I need to do it sooner, I will. But yeah, no, I'd usually hands off, for the first day, just to give the confidence to the lead nav, like
right.
just do it.
Which is important, right? Because if the lead nav feels as if the backup nav is over his or her shoulder, it plays a dynamic, especially when you get a little hungry, you get a little tired, you get a little frayed, and all of a sudden, that could lead to a breakdown in team dynamics.
Yep. Exactly.
Not that it's ever happened to you during a race, but you've probably seen it in other teams. When teams come apart at the seams, what do you think causes that?
Well, in World in Spain, hey, Richard and Shane,
Mm-hmm.
we had the discussion, and none of us had raced together before, except maybe James and Shane, and even though we talked about it ahead of time, there was a lot more friction. Who's lad navving? You're not doing a good job. So we nav wise, and then just. Like physically, Shane started not feeling, his back started giving out. So there was some physical, pain involved too, but things went off the rail that race for sure. And it was, even though we did try to talk about it ahead of time, during the race, it was still.
Sure. And that's adventure racing, right? Sometimes it works out great where you come together and, I would assume in retrospect, racing worlds together as a newer team was a pretty tall order because that was a heck of a race. That was a fast race in the start. They had that massive trek in the beginning. It was like 100K. I
think we did like 85 miles and I don't know how many tens of thousands of elevation. It was a big first leg.
Yeah. And
we started off on the wrong foot too. We were still in a cafe when the buzzer went off, and one of our teammates, I won't say who, was like still in the bathroom. So I'm having a panic attack because I've never not started a race, and they're all clearing out the streets in this little Spanish town. So it was a bad start.
and that was a lesson learned, right? That's how you sort of see that, right? And so putting that experience aside and recognizing that probably the navigation combined with the nav combined with the severity of the first stage combined with racing together as newer racers, you were going to have a hard time no matter what, right? It would have to be magical for it to be perfect and great, and it wasn't.
Yeah, and on paper, I mean, I think we're all actually very experienced, right? It's just not having the dynamic, like not the communication, but just the personalities figured out ahead of time.
Gotcha. And that's only comes through racing with somebody. You can talk all you want. Now, on the flip side of that, you've had races that have gone spectacularly well. Mm-hmm. What drove that success?
Good. Kind of, the communication before a race carried over during race. We executed as we discussed. Things went well in the execution, and we, came out first, second, third, to the first CP or second, and first TA. So then just the adrenaline starts going like, hey, we're doing really great, guys. We're positive talk, helping each other out. I mean, I think that was the biggest reason for success, for Expedition Oregon last year is we worked so well as a team, and there wasn't 1 second that.
So who was your team there?
That was Rhea Coble, Chelsea Magnus, and Joseph Bellier.
Okay.
Now back in France, and myself. And everyone was just constantly helping each other. What can I do? How can I help? Who can I tow? Who can I, talk to? Yeah, it was just constant offering help. And then just, our plan, we executed it well. So
what's your in-race nutrition strategy? Are you a real food person? Are you a bar person? Are you whatever my teammate has in their pack person? That's a very common racer too.
Exactly. Yeah. Whatever you have tastes way better than whatever I'm going to carry.
Exactly.
Real food for sure. I might do like a spring energy, like gel pack, like more natural, like the first day for paddling or biking to something. But yeah, definitely as the race goes on. I really carried on Olaf Hedberg's cheeseburger from McDonald's or hamburger from McDonald's because as good day 3 as it is day.
It's okay. So here we are, right? We're in Scotland, right? We're in Scotland. It's Scotland 2019. The morning of the race, we're the only American team. And there's, all European, amazing, they're built like sticks and they're fast and they're strong and they're very, 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 very strong. The morning of the race, I walk down to the McDonald's in Inverness and I buy 35 McDonald's cheeseburgers.
Yeah.
And to the point, like the manager came out, what do you mean you 35 of them? And here's the American team. Like, could we be any more of a stereotype? Like, here's the American team. And I'm not exactly the most felt guy as it is, right? So here I am, and I'm loading bins up with, but I will tell you, when day 3 came,
everybody wanted
Everybody wanted a bite at McDonald's, and they were looking at me in the TA.
Yes, I think Chelsea and Ray were the ones that we sent to go do the McDonald's drive-through, and they're like, we felt so like stupid ordering. Like, who orders 20 cheeseburgers?
They had the automatic machine in Inverness. It didn't go above 10. Like, I'm tapping the button. And I'm like, can I talk to a manager, please? And here I am, like, with me being me, negotiating the purchase of 35 cheeseburgers in Scotland. So it was
adventure races. Just as soon as you get over like a 1-day race,
exactly. Eat whatever you want, right? Put it in you.
Eat whatever you want, yeah.
And then, of course, there's always, now that we're talking about food, you're doing a race and it's 3 o'clock in the morning and you turn a corner and there's like a 24-hour deli that's open. And it's like heaven. You turn that corner, you walk in, and there's some poor guy behind the counter, and he gets shot out of a cannon because there's 50 adventure racers just basically bought his entire store. Yeah,
the corn dogs and the Red Bulls. They're like,
Yes. At this point in the podcast, a friend of mine who listens, he's not an adventure racer, but he listens to all the podcasts. He shakes his head because we never talk about like fruits and vegetables. We talk about like corn dogs and Red Bull.
Oh, good vegetables though. The people that I don't know how they eat just good like vegetables and fruits on the course. I don't get that. But Eco Challenge, we like came through this village, and it was after the little food stand had closed down. We couldn't buy anything, so we just stopped. I think it was like the mom of one of the guys that was portaging or portering, whatever you say, for us. But I was like, can I buy any food off you? And she gave me just a big cucumber and some crackers, and that cucumber was amazing. Yeah. I had a teammate in Scotland hand me a whole carrot. And it was like the greatest thing in the world. It was like eating a pizza, right? Yeah. So it does show up. So, okay. So you Expedition Oregon last year, right? Mm-hmm. Sounds like you had a great race. You just mentioned Fiji. Yep. So let's see, last year was Oregon and Worlds. The year before, what are we like? Was there anything the year before? I think Oregon the year before. And yeah, Eco Challenge. Keeping them all straight here.
Yeah. And nowadays time is illusionary. Like I forget, I lose track of the years. Who was your Fiji team? Fiji
kind of got brought on later in the game to the AR Georgia, to Jeff and Hunter and Tom Ambrose. So their female was having some back issues, and our team that we applied with in Colorado didn't get selected. And so I was a free agent at that point, and Jeff called me up and said, help us cross the finish line. I said, okay, sounds fun.
And how'd that go for you? I mean, that team got a lot of the media coverage, right? So you got the whole experience.
I'm surprised it didn't get more. They were filming us a lot and they did not show a lot, which I'm actually thankful for. No, it was good. There was some eye rolling and some things that happened that, I would have maybe done different, but we finished and that was what we went to accomplish. And Exactly. It was a great experience being part of the TV show, the local villages. I'm sure you've talked to a lot of people about that race. It was a cool experience. And then my family, I have 2 daughters and my husband were there at the finish line, which was awesome.
That's very powerful.
Vacation a week after. So it was a good experience.
Yeah. The 2 big things I hear about Fiji, Eco Challenge Fiji, was that people were blown away by the scale of the production, that the helicopters and the camera people and just all the noise around it. And then they also felt too, and this is kind of split. Some people talk about how it was a true blue adventure race. Mm-hmm. And some folks felt as if it kind of ended a bit soon for them, that some folks came off the course a little bit earlier than they expected to. But it made for enthralling television.
Yeah. Disappointed they didn't continue it. Would have liked to do more of those, but it was the media production. It was amazing. And those camera guys there's the last trek section. We had a guy doing the same exact, I don't even know, 20 mile trek with the camera the whole time. And we slept and he stayed awake, and the stuff that they can do, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah. The fascinating thing for those who enjoyed Eco Challenge Fiji and they've kind of consumed it, and like the scene with Team Estonia they had the camera person with them in the canyon when the water came up, how fortuitous, like, cause they were with them. The behind the scenes of how those events are put on. Kevin Hodder was huge there as the race organizer.
Yeah.
And the behind the scenes of how those races are produced is sometimes more fascinating than the race itself. And to your point, like the physical fitness of the camera people. I mean, just to hang with teams for hours and hours and hours and carry all that equipment is really something else.
Yeah,
What's your this is like asking you to pick your favorite child, right? So it's not a fair question. But what was your favorite race?
Ooh, of all time.
All time. And here's how I kind of qualify it. If you could go back and just do it again, not the same exact experience, but be dropped in the same spot with the same people, where would you go?
Oh gosh. Yeah, I needed to think about this one ahead of time.
Well, we know it's definitely not Worlds, so we can take that one off the table.
No, not Worlds. Yeah, no. I mean, I loved my teammates for all the Cowboy Tough races. I think Primal Quest in Tahoe was at that point. I mean, that was definitely my longest race at the time. That would have been 2016, I believe. And it took us 8.5 days. Loved teammates, just figuring out I could race for that long was amazing. The scenery, the Swiftwater stuff we did on the American rivers there. And it was a really great experience for us. So
it all kind of came together for you.
Yeah.
Right. Teammate, terrain, weather, challenges. It all started to check itself out for you.
Yep. Definitely.
So let's pay some bills a little bit. So Never Summer Adventure Race. When's it coming up?
Never Summer is July 16th, 17th this year. We are returning to the area of the Colorado River. Rancho del Rio is a little private owned area there, but it is an all new course from previous years if people have done the race before. I have a 6-hour and a 24-hour, and it'll be, some class 2-3 swiftwater paddling, mountain biking, trekking over, Colorado Rockies. Love that area because it is like the upper Colorado has the red dirt, sagebrush area, like more desert feel. And then you go up, 500 feet and you get into the alpine, the evergreens. It's changing ecosystems, within 20 minutes. It's pretty cool. Yeah.
It's amazing how and we don't see that back east. I mean, the east is the east, right? And first off, so much of our land is settled here. So as a result of that, we've lost huge swaths of wilderness, but definitely having been out west, a little bit of elevation gain, completely different story. Mm-hmm. Has for the boats for that race, are you supplying the boats or pack rafts expected?
Pack rafts, but we do. There's a Colorado River Center out of Rancho del Rio that has duckies available for rent. So it's a big reason I stay close to that area because that is a boat source that is critical in this area.
You have them right there waiting for you.
Yeah, so I have a link on the website that tells people to rent their tandem or single ducky there. But stand-up paddle boards, pack rafts, people can bring their own inflatable if they have them.
Yeah, we're doing a race here. Naira's doing the longest day race, and there's racers are to bring their own pack rafts. And pack rafts are interesting because they've not yet made the jump over to general population. Everyone really knows what they are. And so somebody asked, well, can I bring this? Can I bring this? And the race director basically said, if it floats, you could use it. Yep. Like put a PFD on, and if you want to get on it, that's your call. So who knows what they're going to be? And it's going to be interesting to see who shows up with what. But we've talked a lot recently, and like I said, Eric Caravala, and by the time this premieres, that episode is already out there. Eric in Pack Rafting Adventures talks a lot about the growth of pack rafting and adventure racing and how that's getting more and more people further into the backcountry.
Yep. I miss my alpaca.
Well, on that note of what you're missing, sometimes it's a trope and it's overused, the idea that adventure racing prepares you for life, right? And by having a challenge, an artificial challenge, and echoing Grant Killian again, right? A contrived inconvenience, that by doing these things artificially, it prepares you for life's challenges that come down the pike. And as you and I spoke a bit before we started recording, and as the adventure race community, many people know about it because it was a very public event. You recently had a very, very challenging situation with your home and a fire. And tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, December 30th, 2021, we were skiing in Breckenridge that morning and started hearing about a fire that was not too far. It's actually my favorite mountain bike trail that I ride every day, Davidson Mesa, Marshall Mesa area, South Boulder. And, at the time, my sister-in-law, who lives not, 2 towns over, was trying to get in touch with us. And we, said, it's not going to cross the major highway, interstate that goes between Denver and Boulder. It's not going to cross there. And there's no way it's going to get to our neighborhood. We live up on basically on top of Davidson Mesa. We had just built our kind of long-term dream home up there. We had just finished building it last year when the fire came through and took out pretty much our whole street and a lot of our neighborhood, in addition to huge areas of Superior and Louisville. So we came back, or actually my husband came back that afternoon, and we actually have footage of our house burning because he was able to sneak in. But yeah, so for a few days, it's it's hard not to cry and talk about it. But then after that, it's you stand up, you walk forward, you what do you need to do next? What do you need? What do we need to do? And knowing also we have kids watching us, our every move, and it doesn't help to sit around and do nothing. You show them just keep one foot in front of the other, and make steps with insurance and rebuilding. So, but yeah, it's funny you put it that way. I mean, definitely adventure racing, so much of life that you can, connect, the resiliency, the suffering, the things you go through in adventure racing with life. And I don't know if which came first, chicken or, is it the type of people that could survive anything, do adventure racing, or does adventure racing help you survive anything? But yeah, we've, we're kind of viewing this as an adventure, and, still, we just got into a new place that we're at for a month, 2 days ago. And then we have our next move on June 1st. So it's an adventure for us. And, I do, there's a lot of similarities between, an expedition adventure race and your house burning down.
Well, and it's true. And well, first of all, thank God you're safe and your family's safe. Right. Which I'm sure was an incredible consolation in the very beginning when you were absorbing it. And I was involved in following along and hearing about it. And many people, I'm sure, listen to this probably saw the same thing. I know that the adventure race community and the general community very strong with you. The GoFundMe came across, and people really, they showed their caring for you by doing what they can in that direction.
Yeah, I would publicly thank everybody that's reached out, contributed financially or gear, and people even were sending me boxes of adventure stuff. So it was just amazing the support and love that we felt and still feel now. And so just thank you if anyone contributed to that. From the bottom of our hearts, we thank you. Well,
same old story, right? What you put out in the world comes back to you, right? And people, they couldn't do enough for you, and they return that caring to you. And I think it's important. And like I said, I tend to avoid the conversation about how, everything is not always a proxy for life. And sometimes racing is just racing, right? We're people with maps on our hands running around in the woods for 24, 36, 5 days, whatever it is. But I think that your point before about what chicken or the egg, what comes first, I bet it's probably a little bit of both, right? And adventure racers, they enter the sport with a sense of a can-do attitude. It has to be there somewhat. But as you go through increased challenges and as you do bigger and bigger races, you realize that you can be more. And more importantly, you could be who you have to be at a certain time. Mm-hmm. I'm sure that if I gave you enough time, you could point to a part in a race where you thought you were done. I'm finished. I can't go on. I'm toast. A little rest, a little sugar, a little caffeine, and then you moved forward. Yeah. We will guess that there's probably some parallels to your life right now going through the same feeling. Has this interfered with your ability to put on the Never Summer race, or are you able to do both?
Able to do both. So January, I think 14th was when my permit was due to BLM, and I had not completed everything. I was going to dedicate the first week that the kids went back to school to doing that. So I reached out to Jason Blair, who's raced a bunch of my races and has helped another race director do some course scouting and setting. So I reached out to him. He lives in Steamboat Springs, so not too far from where the Never Summer summer races. And he said he was happy to help. So he's been a big part of course planning this year. So I'm really excited to have him on board and help. And he got that permit submitted to BLM and has been working with National Forest. So as I'm able to contribute more and more, I'm kind of, taking some things and we're meeting, but he'll stay involved the whole time and continue to help me. He's been amazing.
Good.
The same thing with Sleep When You're Dead, which is October, a 12-hour overnight race. Bruce that puts on the Nomad, or has been trying to put on the Nomad for the past couple of years, has offered to kind of help me with that event as well. I've got some great people helping. And so it's not going to affect anything. Gear wise, our first big purchases after the fire, we got our bikes. We got some new bikes. So I have
it's a bit of a bright spot, right?
Yeah. So there's a few things, someone got a new pack and little small things like that. But
so what is your next race?
That I'm racing?
Yeah.
I don't have anything on the calendar. It's been a little bit of a stress to think of all the things that I don't have yet. Right. There's a 6-hour or 12-hour Genesis race in May that I've been invited to join, and they'll let me join last minute. They have a bike, but like I said, I still need to get a pack. So once I start getting a few more things, I'll probably commit to doing a race, but I'm not there yet.
And I don't want to fall into the trap of an East Coaster, but I almost feel like Nationals, which is in California this year, is kind of in your backyard.
Yeah, no, I'd love to go out there. And, also team and new racers that are listening, finding the right team it's tough. And over the past few years, I've kind of been a free agent because the team that, I mentioned, Primal Quest and Cowboy Tough, we've kind of gone our different, Ryan just his wife just had their second baby. Julian's not wanting to do the longer races, so team wise, I've kind of been a little bit more of a free agent. So, it's just, if someone invites me and it's a good fit, then, I'm open to looking at that race.
But that's a really good thing for the newer racers who are on the listening to the podcast today. It's not uncommon for there to be mobility among race teammates. It's a very, very common thing. And what I found a working solution that works out really well for people is that when you go to races, watch the other racers, watch them in the parking lot, watch them during the race, and don't hesitate to say to somebody, "Hey, I got an open spot here for this race. Do you want to go?" Like there's a racer in Philadelphia named Jared Kresge, who we got to know through racing alongside him, and my race partner Jimmy and I we wanted the third for the Stockville, which is the 2-day race that Rootstock puts on. And Jared joined us and we had a really good result in large part due to him and who he was as a racer. So you're right. It's okay to kind of shop around and it's okay to look for teammates.
Yeah. So it's, at the same time, it's good to have those bad experiences too. Cause then you can now I know how to communicate. This is how I race. This is what I want. This is what I'm looking for. This is my goal for this race. Are you on the same page as I am? And so having some fails in the past and joining teams that didn't work out for me, I know to ask the right questions now.
I've been there myself. I've been paired with people that it was not a very good fit. And, and you learn during the race to sort of deal with it. And after the race, you grow from it, right? Because I know every challenging relationship that I have, I bring something to the table also. It's not just the other person, right? It's never just them, it's myself too. Right. Whenever I'm disturbed, there's something wrong with me also, right? That's a spiritual axiom that people work with, but you grow from it. And I think it was a through line to your conversation with me today, Katie. That's a big part of it, right? The idea that you grow from this sport and the sport makes you better, whether it be dealing with a family challenge that you're going through right now, or whether it be putting on a race, or whether it be whatever it is, you learn from it and you move forward.
Yep. And even 4 days after the fire, we were already starting to see how are we going to be better people in the end? How are we going to help people better? How can we give better in the future? How can we support people better in the future? Same thing as, racing, how can I do better next time? How can I bring more to the team? It's been an interesting realization for sure.
Thank you, Katie, for sharing your time and experience with our listeners. All of us at the Dark Zone enjoy bringing adventure into your life, and thank you, listeners, for choosing to spend time with us. If you've enjoyed this episode, please pay a visit to your podcast streaming platform of choice and leave us a review. That's the best way to spread the word. Also, always feel free to reach out to me, Brian, at ardarkzone.com. Your feedback and guest suggestions are always welcome. Thank you for joining us, and have fun out there.